everybody. Welcome to Story Makers. Another day, another show. My name is Keshav Puri. And as promised, I am bringing to you another successful story. This is a story of a serial entrepreneur, seasoned entrepreneur from the fintech world. I have with me Nelson from the fintech world, from MODIFI, CEO and co-founder of MODIFI. Hi, Nelson. How are you today?
Hi, Keshav. I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Hope India is treating you well.
Oh, always. Great to be back in Mumbai.
Right. Lovely from Mumbai. Lovely. So what food you had today, just before coming to interview?
Well, obviously we had great food in an event, all Indian. So I couldn't even name it, but it was fantastic.
I hope the spices were okay for you.
Spices were okay, yeah. I mean, I like spicy, but probably I'm not used to the typical Indian spice level, but it was all good. I'm still alive and kicking.
Perfect. Good to see you. A lovely smile that you have. That tells a lot about your positivity that you throw to the outside world. But before I go to the next questions or probably the further conversation, just want to tell you to the people who are watching, Nelson has a lovely vision, a mission, which says and which talks about collaboration, empowerment, and visibility, and a goal to solve the complexity of this global trade of finance. And he's doing great in that. So Nelson, I just got to know that you are a trained lawyer. And from that, now you are an entrepreneur, and that too in the fintech industry, in the fintech world. And you've first co-founded BillPay, which you sold to Klarna, and now you are a co-founder and CEO of MODIFI. So please take us to this lovely journey of yours.
Yeah, well, we don't have so much time, but no, in a nutshell, I think indeed it's a bit of an unusual career. But basically, I was a corporate M&A lawyer for the first few years of my career and worked a lot for private equity investors, and then moved on to one of those private equity investors, one of our former clients, stayed there for a good 4 years almost, and looked at a lot of banking and financial institutions. And then I said, we have to be better and we have to get better, and data and technology should help us to modernize this very large industry. And and then we started as an entrepreneur, the company BillPay as a buy now, pay later player, a bit like a Zest Money here in India, I would say. Now almost 5.5 years ago, we started MODIFI, which is my current business. And this is indeed all about empowering small to mid-sized businesses around the world to participate in global commerce, participate in global trade, and by doing so, also grow their local economies. I think that's at the core of what we are doing.
Lovely. So I just want to ask you that what did you saw in the fintech world that made you think that, okay, I can solve this better. I can probably enter and I can give a better solution. So what flaws, I would not use the word flaws here, but still what you saw in the fintech world, which is not going right?
Yeah. No, I think it's really all about applying digital tools to these a bit like more old-fashioned markets, right? So, and when we looked at how people do trade at the moment, how import and export transactions are being handled, we feel that we can do a lot better overall. And one important part of that trade, obviously, is how do you actually collect payments, who gets paid at what point in time of a transaction. And so it was a bit like taking something we learned a lot from our first company, BillPay, but it was also like, providing buy now, pay later ultimately to customers. It was actually doing and happening in business-to-business transactions, but in a very clunky manner, right? Lots of papers involved still, lots of calls, maybe sometimes even faxes being sent around. So it's hard to conceive that it actually works at scale without a digital layer, which is now being built by us and many others, obviously.
Lovely. Okay, so now as you've entered India, now you're trying to enter more of Indian markets. So how do you think MODIFI will help Indian entrepreneurs, to do business globally? And how many ventures you've touched till now, and how is MODIFI growing in India?
Yeah, I think the good news is actually we have already helped quite a bit, but I think maybe one step back, how do we help and what problem are we solving, right? At the core is typically a situation where you have like a small to mid-sized exporter who wants to sell their goods and services to very often a larger buyer. And so you have an imbalance of power, I would say. It's not a level playing field. So, and these large buyers tend to optimize their own cash position and say, like, I put the order in, but you will have to wait for 3, 4, 5 months for your money from my end. And that is very, very difficult for many entrepreneurs and businesses because they can't wait and can't afford to wait for that money because they had all the upfront costs, right? For people, salaries, raw materials. So we step in between and say, look, you exporter, you can actually cash in early, basically a large amount of money already in the first 1-2 days of your trade. And your buyer still enjoys the payment term. They can pay up to 180 days later. And I think that's, the whole idea of enabling these trade transactions, because otherwise what will happen is that, the exporter will say, I can't afford to wait. And the big buyer will say, look, tough luck, I'll go elsewhere, right? So I think this is really, the problem we are solving. And in India, we have been, and India has been fantastic to us. It was actually the first non-European market where we launched this product in 2019 in a very small scale pilot phase, as we called it. And we learned a lot from the Indian exporter community also for designing this product and what it does and how it is working. So we are forever grateful for that. And we have actually supported Indian businesses and entrepreneurs with roughly $1.5 billion so far already. So we have actually done a good amount of financing and trade already, I think, which is great. But we still believe it is just the beginning because India is booming, the export sector is booming. I think everybody has very high ambitions, which is great. And I think we are, halfway through kind of getting to the ambition level we all want to see. And we want to play our part here and, assist as many entrepreneurs as possible here in India. We have, I was just asked today also, how many customers do we actually have here in India? I don't have it top of my hand, but it should be around like 500, 600 exporters. Overall, we have 1,600 buyers and sellers on our platform on a global scale. So it's a global platform, but India is a very important market for us.
Perfect. I love the spirit of yours and the way you're growing. It's great. MODIFI is doing good there. All right. So as the Indian government is advocating made in India, right? Make in India, made in India. So how do you fit there? And what kind of benefits you can give to Indian market there?
Yeah, I think we are really 100% aligned, which is a great thing, right? And I think it was actually very good from the government to I think as early as 2014, 15, I think, to basically come up with initiative, right? Because it actually takes also an economy to embrace it and to execute that strategy, right? And I see now a lot of momentum, I think, in India. I think the macroeconomic environment is also playing definitely in the cards of the Indian community here, I would say, right? Lots of people want to build and create and manufacture in India and like diversify their supply chain. Don't want to have, one dependency or one market. So I think it really is, in a very good shape. And what we bring to the table ultimately, I think, is at the moment with the product we are offering to the export community, access to cash very, very fast and quick, as I described earlier. It also comes with risk protection against any default, because if you can imagine, you have a buyer which you haven't met maybe because you had no chance to meet that person in I don't know, in the US, for example, but you still send the goods, right? And you still actually wait for the money. So we also take over this risk that the buyer goes bankrupt, for example, by the time they have to pay. So, the exporter has peace of mind, I would say. And on top of that comes a suite of software services to make trade a little bit easier, right? So we create visibility. So where are my goods actually? So we have a shipment tracking tool, which everybody can actually use without being a customer. Type in the container number and you know where your goods are, for example. I think these things all help, like the Indian exporters to also, do more trade and be more bullish about trading with more countries. I think we often see exporters who only have maybe like a buyer in one country, but, the world is big, right? And so is the community. So we also want to enable these people to say, okay, I go for it. I not only ship, I don't know, to China or to UAE, but also to the US and also to Europe, right? Because we have their backs.
Right. So I can see that you're actually mitigating the risks for the exporters, and they can expand to at the global level to whichever country they want to go in, right? So can you share some success stories that you have for now, and you've seen lovely success happening with the Indian entrepreneurs?
Yes, and there are many, but I want to highlight maybe one, which is
Sure.
really, I think, a poster child, I would say, at least from my point of view. So that was a business which was basically they were active in a single, manufacturing industry, and had only a single corridor where they would export through. So that was kind of when we came across them, or they came across us, and we provided the first capital to do the first trades, really, right? And what was like a single-digit million dollar revenue business, so a nice business, but still fairly small, I would say. And now, like 4 years later, I think they are serving not one industry but 50 industries. And they basically are active, I think, in now 16 or 17 countries. And we were very fortunate to also be able, with our global platform, to support them not only in the beginning in India, but when they actually branched out and said, okay, I now want to have a US business because I want to have more firepower in the US. We were also then following them in the US, supporting them in their US business, for example. And that's something we see a lot. People, also then branch out and say, I go to the US, I go to Dubai, I go to Singapore, right? To do more trades and more trades. And with our global network, we are able to support them on their way, sometimes even advise them a bit like how to do and tackle a new market. So I think that's a perfect example. And now this business has, I think, trending towards $500-600 million in revenues, and has done a fantastic journey. And we were like very, very honored to be part of that journey.
Lovely, lovely. What a perfect example you shared there. And now I really want to know, since MODIFI is growing so huge in India, and the way you are tapping different ventures and different business owners. So what are the services that you will be bringing to India in future? If you can share some of them.
Yeah, so I think the core value proposition will probably remain the same. I think left and right we will add new features and new products. I think there is a growing demand of also having different currencies on the platform at the moment. Most of the trade we see, especially also from India, is US dollars. So you have US dollar invoices and they want to get US dollars. But I think this is also maybe changing over time, that people want to receive INR, for example, right? And not only the US dollar. So I think adding currency to the mix is something we are working on. Okay. And also when you do that, obviously there is always a bit of a risk involved in currency fluctuations. So something we are testing in another market at the moment is currency protection, hedging against currency fluctuation. So those are the things we are doing, and then we will add a bit more services to make life easier to trade, right? So I talked about the shipment tracking, but we also have CFO tools to make it easier for us CFO to say, can I afford now to do next trade? Can I take that order? How much limit do I have available? How much liquidity do I get? When do I get paid back, for example? So just I think the whole suite of how you actually do business, mostly from a financial services point of view, obviously. So we are not very good at making their production better, right? That's not my core competence, I would say, or our core competence. But I think it should be a place where people can do more than just payments and getting liquidity, I think.
Mm-hmm. But as we see, the cross-border transactions are often complex, right? They are very complex. So how does MODIFI solve that complexity there? Is what I really want to know.
Yeah, you're right. And I was also shocked, quite frankly, when I looked into this business and we started to build how complex and old-fashioned still also sometimes the mere moving money from A to B is, right? And I think that is also something we also had to learn, quite frankly, with every market, especially in markets where you have foreign currency regulations, which make it a bit difficult or more difficult, or you have to know your way how to make sure that the money actually arrives at the point where it's needed and it's supposed to be, right? And I think this is something where we also learned quite a lot, especially also in markets like India, but China has very similar restrictions and regulations. So you really have to understand how to make sure that the money actually travels as it's supposed to travel.
Right.
And this is something, it's not just a swift wire transfer, right? I mean, more often than not, these things get stuck somewhere. So you have to really, I think, also have good partners, have good relationships with the banks, understand where they come from and what checks they are doing, because ultimately we are still using bank infrastructure, right? If, for example, an Indian exporter has their current account with RBL, for example, RBL ultimately would be the bank who receives funds from us, right? And so they know us now, but I think it took a little bit of time to kind of make people aware of the product and how it works. But now I think it's really, in a very good shape. So these were like more like the early years challenges, I would say. They are hopefully behind us.
I get it. Looking perfect there. Looking nice. All right. So as we see, there's a global shift towards sustainability, and I want to know what you guys are contributing to that, and what initiatives you're taking towards sustainability.
Yeah, I think it's super important. As I'm always telling my investors, like we are probably the perfect ESG company, right?
Right.
Because we actually help these smaller businesses and entrepreneurs to become big and grow and help their the social development in their local economy. So I think we do make a difference on the social part. I think on the environmental part, which is very much focused very often in the West, I would say.
Yes.
We are also top of things. We are carbon neutral as a company ourselves. So we just started that journey last year, and I think that's an ongoing journey, obviously. And we obviously also like to support businesses with sustainable products, right? Funny that you kind of asked that, but the company I talked about actually was the first deals we did were like they basically sold solar panels, and obviously that's great. That's exactly what we like to do more.
Right.
So I think this is something which is really, I think, at the core of many things. It's not so easy on every day, right? Because you also have trade which happens in other industries which are maybe not quite there yet. I mean, I think for sometimes like fast fashion, you can argue, is it really sustainable already or sustainable enough? And probably the answer is no, not yet, right?
Of course.
But I think, these products are moving around and need to be financed. So we are happy to support that. But I mean, also our refinancing bank, back to back, we have large institutions who finance us, and they have their own ESG agenda. And so we are also, working very closely together with them how we can, meet those requirements. But I think on the social level, which is a bit like underestimated sometimes in the West, right? In the developed world, people don't fully recognize how important the social development is also in many parts of the world still.
Right.
And I think the product is exactly what ESG is trying to achieve.
Perfect. Good to know that. All right. We see a bigger issue that the access to credit is often a bottleneck, right? How do you address this issue? And what are your takes on that? Access to credit.
I think this is still, after so many years, also a fintech. I mean, fintech has been around for 15 years. And I think it's not fully solved yet. I think we have to be honest here in the industry. I think we are trying to do our part to give access to liquidity, ultimately also to companies which might not really qualify for a typical full-blown bank support. I think all of our customers typically are banked, so they have a current account. It's not like they are unbanked, but they are not getting the love they probably should get, right? And I think the beauty of our model is also that we can advance liquidity to businesses which seem to be a bit small, like, for, let's say, 500K or maybe $1 million, for example, just to give them, as money to spend on whatever. But since we have typically a counterpart, a buyer who pays us back,
right,
our sits more with the counterpart. And if you have a strong counterpart, you can leverage their credibility and their creditworthiness to advance money and cash to a bit like the weaker part of the trade. And I think that's the beauty of the model. We basically can leverage the creditworthiness of large buyers and give now this, invoiced amount immediately as cash to the very often a bit less financially strong exporters. And I think that's the beauty of the business model, which I love so much. And it really travels around the world. It's not only a phenomenon in India. We have, these restrictions and not enough access to capital and working capital, especially for the small to mid-sized businesses, basically in all the markets we are in. And that is basically like from China to Mexico City, right? So it's not only something which Indian entrepreneurs would struggle with. It's a global struggle.
It's a global struggle, of course, there. All right. Before I let you go and before I leave you, I have last two questions. First is, can you briefly decode MODIFI for us in a very layman language so that anybody who's watching can understand what is MODIFI?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, MODIFI stands for Modern Digital Finance.
Right.
And what we are doing is we are basically enabling importers or mostly exporters around the world, especially in India, to sell to buyers who demand payment terms so they can cash in early with our solution and our help. And at the same time, their buyers enjoy the payment terms they need to actually place the order. So it's really enabling all about these trade transactions. And yeah, I think that's, in a nutshell, what we are doing at the core.
Perfect, perfect. Sounds good there. All right. Again, as I said, I had two questions before I let you go. My last question here is if you have to give an advice to any business entrepreneur, any Indian entrepreneur who is doing a business trade, a global trade, right, cross-border trade, if you have to give an advice to a budding entrepreneur, what would that be?
Yeah, so I think we have so much potential and talent in India and in the export sector as well. I feel sometimes people are a little bit maybe too defensive. I think we should really encourage the entrepreneurs to think bigger and to really say, I have a right to play in global commerce. And I should actually not serve only one market, but maybe 10 markets. And
Right.
on that way, maybe there's a market 2 or 3 or 4. But I think it's important to take a bit of a more like a global view and see what is out there, who could actually like be interested in my products, and who could be buyers who I would like to work with. And there's, I think, tons of also interesting tools now to find those buyers. I mean, in marketplace environments, you are, already fairly well equipped. And then when it comes down to actually doing it, I mean, I think the things we are tackling are pretty important. You really have to make sure that you can afford these trades, and if you can't, please call us, right? And we will be happy to help. But also, if you're not using, I think it's typically something where you have to be a bit aware of who you're dealing with. I think that's very important for everyone. Because the worst outcome is that you basically produce something nice and you have a great product and you probably even pay for shipping, and
Right.
then you don't get paid, right? So I think trying to get your hands around who do you want to trade with, I think, is pretty important. And also, again, like here, we are happy to help and give you a view on whether these are good guys or maybe guys who probably should not be served.
Should not be served. All right, right. So people, if you're watching this and if you need any help from MODIFI, MODIFI is here to help in India, in Indian market. Very much landed and growing really fast there. Thank you so much, Nelson, for giving your time to us. It was lovely talking to you and knowing your views about the growing world of fintech. And I wish you all the best for your future endeavors of whatever you do. And thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keshav. It was great to be on the show, and thank you very much.
All right, guys. So this was Keshav Puri. With me was Nelson. You're watching Story Makers, where we bring to you inspiring stories. I hope this story helped you and made you learn a bit about what you can do and how big you can do in life. Right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.